Vice President Kamala Harris now hitting the campaign trail today in Milwaukee, as CBS News estimates she has secured enough endorsements from delegates to be considered the likely Democratic presidential nominee. We should note, of course, these endorsements are not legally binding and could change, but unlikely at this point. Senate Majority Leader Chuck Schumer and House Minority Leader Hakeem Jeffries endorsed Harris's bid for president today. Meanwhile, President Biden has ended his COVID-19 self-isolation and returned to Washington for what is now just one term for him in the White House. His return coincides with Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu and his visit to the United States. We'll have more on his trip coming up soon. But first, we start with Finn Gómez and Nancy Cordes on the 2024 campaign. Finn, of course, our political director at CBS News. Nancy Cordes, the chief White House correspondent. Great to have both of you. Nancy, you're standing outside at the White House, the president returning to Washington. What's it like among Biden's confidants and closest advisors to have him back at the residence, back at the White House after these torturous few days in Rehoboth Beach?
A lot of long faces at the White House, frankly, Bob. No one wanted things to end this way. These are people who have dedicated 4 years in some cases, decades in other cases, to this man, to Joe Biden. They were all in on another bid for the White House. And so it's really bittersweet for them. They're glad that he's feeling better. They're glad he's come back, but certainly he's coming back to a much different political reality than the one he left. He's now a lame duck president with just 6 more months to accomplish whatever it is that he thinks he can to cement his legacy. And that's why we're told the president is going to be giving this primetime address tomorrow night, first to explain to the American people in public, not with a statement, but actually on camera, why it is that he decided to step aside and not seek re-election, and then what his goals are for the next 6 months and what he wants to do.
Stick with us, Nancy. Finn, great to see you. What's the latest with former President Trump? You track his campaign very closely.
Yeah, Bob, in the first extensive remarks we've heard from the former president and the Republican nominee, first extensive remarks since Vice President Harris moved to the top of the ticket. He held a conference call with reporters. He went after her on the Biden administration's policy on immigration and the southern border. He also said that he would be willing to debate her multiple times, but he did say he did stick to his position that he bowed out of the ABC News debate, which was scheduled to be held in September.
And Finn, let's stick with you for a moment. And then, Nancy, I would love your take on this as well. There's so much talk among Democrats about the vice presidential selection for Vice President Harris. What's your latest reporting?
Yeah, Bob, well, the situation is fluid, but I did hear from a top Democrat close to the Harris campaign and the DNC who tells me that 4 names have moved up the list of consideration to be the running mate for Vice President Harris. Those names are Senator Mark Kelly from Arizona, Roy Cooper, the governor of North Carolina, Gretchen Whitmer, the governor of Michigan, and, of course, Andy Beshear of Kentucky. Now, of those 4 names, this source told me that Mark Kelly has recently moved up in the list, in part because he has a strong relationship with Democratic donors. Donors really like him. Also, he's got a very strong relationship with Vice President Harris going back to their time in the Senate as well. He comes from a border state. The Harris campaign is looking at a Sun Belt strategy more so than a Rust Belt strategy that involves Arizona, of course, Kelly's home state, and also because of his background with guns and guns violence and within his own family. That issue will be looked at and moved at the top of key issues for the campaign, something they can focus on as well. But so this source tells me that Kelly is someone that they're looking at specifically in the last 24 hours.
Nancy, what are you hearing on that front? And how do you expect President Biden to handle his own role on the campaign in the coming weeks?
Bob, when you talk to Democratic operatives, both inside and outside the campaign, 2 names consistently come up. One is North Carolina Governor Roy Cooper. He and Kamala Harris have a long history together. They were both state AGs at the same time. They have a great relationship. They were out campaigning together recently. And many Democrats say that that would be a natural fit between Kamala Harris and a like-minded Democrat who has shown that he can win in a battleground state like Roy Cooper. The other name that they frequently mention is Josh Shapiro, the Pennsylvania governor of the largest battleground state in the country. He and Harris also have deep ties. They've also campaigned together recently. They both come from a law and order background. And so Democratic operatives, whether they're connected to this vetting process or not, and generally they aren't, they consider those two to have something of a head start. But when I speak to the campaign, what they argue is it's too soon to be winnowing anyone out. They're at the very early stages. Everyone wants to know who this pick is going to be, but vetting is a process that does not take place over 24 or 48 hours. It usually takes weeks, if not months, and they stress that they're just at the very beginning of this process, even though they don't have that much time.
Finn, are any of your Trump sources nervous about Senator J.D. Vance being Trump's running mate now that everything's changed?
No, actually, Donald Trump was asked about that on this call that I referred to earlier, and he said that he has no intention of replacing J.D. Vance, as we've seen some reporting. The fact the matter is that they believe that he still adds to their Rust Belt strategy, Michigan, Wisconsin, Pennsylvania, because of his biography, because of his ties in his background with the Appalachian area. They feel that they feel strongly that he can help them win in those states.
Nancy, what are you hearing about President Biden and his return to the White House? You said long faces among the aides, but he's getting ready for this major national address Wednesday night. Right. What do you believe he's going to say? How long is it going to be? What should we be expecting?
Well, they are still working on the speech, so we don't have a length just yet. But what I've been told is that he's going to talk pretty specifically about some of the policies that he wants to advance over in the next 6 months. First and foremost, one of his biggest goals is to find a way to bring home the up to 8 American-Israeli hostages who have been held by Hamas by some 8 months now. Benjamin Netanyahu, the Israeli prime minister, is here in Washington this week. The two men are going to sit down later this week. These negotiations have gotten tantalizingly close many times between Hamas, Israel, the U.S., and Qatar. That will obviously be topic number one when Biden and Netanyahu meet face to face. But beyond that, I'm also told that he really does want to try to move ahead on laying out his vision for a reformed U.S. Supreme Court. This is something that he has been talking about for a while. He's been mulling over with experts. He is said to have great concerns about what he views as some recent ethical lapses on the court. And he did just add an event to his schedule on Monday, Bob. It is a visit to the LBJ Presidential Library for a civil rights event that he had to cancel a couple of weeks ago. And so that could be a fitting backdrop if he decides that he wants to finally unveil those Supreme Court proposals.
March 31st, 1968 with LBJ, July 21st, 2024 for President Biden. 2 days that will live on in American political history when presidents withdrew. Finn Gómez, Nancy Cortez, thank you.
You're welcome.